Live from the Sims Tower in the Robinson Auto Group studio, we are AM 1600 WKKX.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Or, no, not welcome back.
Well, kind of.
Well,
we were here before.
Ish.
Yeah.
You're listening to Whispers Radio here on AM 1600 WKKX, the Valley's Watchdog, and UPRN, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We're live today.
Yes, we are.
We have been the past few weeks.
Yes, we have been.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes, it is.
Give us a call, 304-214-1600. If you're out of the area, 1-866-514-1600. That's toll free. We'd love to hear from you. We got a call. Oh.
It's our guest.
Our guest is on the line. Well,
I guess we messed around too much before.
Oh, it happens.
We got all of the host chat out of the way.
During Bill's show.
Yeah.
we covered all that during Bill's show, so
Yeah,
if you missed it, and all you listening online, you
oh, well.
you missed out.
And you know what? There is hope for us. Regis and Kelly got their first Emmys.
Really?
Yes. So there's hope for us. I don't know what radio people get, but if Regis and Kelly can get an Emmy, we can.
We need to get something.
I know it.
You know, as much entertainment as we spew out of this.
That's right.
You know, and I say spew, you know, figuratively. Let's go to our guest, just right off the bat. Stephen Braude, Dr. Stephen Braude. He's a professor and program chair of philosophy at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. We're talking about psychokinesis today. For those of you that don't know, that's moving things with your mind. Stephen, you with us?
I am. Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. This is. I told you during email. You know, this is a pretty interesting topic. You know, and you usually don't hear it from, professors from colleges and stuff like that. Usually, it's the guys with. You know,
don't you say it.
I'm not going to say it, but like
he's going to say tinfoil hats.
Yeah, I was because a lot of our guests choose that route. You know,
well, it's just a fashion accessory.
It's not saying anything against you. I mean, you actually are a credible person, so it's like.
Well, on the radio, I don't have to show you my underwear.
That's true.
All right, so let's talk about this. You know, how did you get into, studying? You study parapsychology, right?
Well, I came to it a little bit late. It's actually sort of a pathetic story. I was in graduate school and busy writing a dissertation on temporal logic and the philosophy of time. And in those days, I considered myself to be a kind of hard-nosed materialist, not for any particularly good reasons. It was just a kind of conceit about myself I was cultivating in those days.
Uh-huh.
And it was a slow day in Northampton, Massachusetts, and a couple friends came over. We'd seen the only movie in town, and they said, hey, let's play this game called Table Up. They meant let's have a seance, but they didn't know anything about parapsychology either, but they thought this was a game, and they played it a few times, and they said when it works, it's a lot of fun. So for the next 3 hours, to my great surprise, and it shocked the hell out of me, really, I watched my table rise in the air and spell out answers in response to questions.
Wow.
Now, I mean, I was in no position at that point in my life to really do anything about that. I figured, and I think correctly, that I couldn't really talk to my mentors at the university about that. So, and I had no place for it in my worldview at the time. So I literally just put it out of mind and focused on finishing my PhD and getting a job and doing some respectable mainstream philosophy and then getting tenure. And once I had tenure, I felt
you could do whatever you wanted to do.
Well, almost. But I realized if I was an honest intellectual, I really needed to come to grips with this thing that had happened to me back in grad school. And I was absolutely certain that it had happened the way I experienced it. My friends weren't practical jokers. It was my table. It was broad daylight. And if one of the friends left the room for a moment, the table still rose under our fingers. So it was rising under our fingers, and we could be standing next to the table. So clearly our knees were not lifting the table.
Yeah.
And pressure from the table wasn't lifting it because it was rising under our hands. And so I realized at the time that if I was going to do a responsible job of doing the intellectually right thing, then I needed to become a member of the community of scientists and academics who are looking carefully at it. And I did, and I've since been past president of the Parapsychological Association, which is an affiliate of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and I've written 5 books, and so I'm about as much of an insider now as it's possible to be in that community.
You dove head first.
I did.
Now parapsychology, it's hard. Did you go to school at all? Because I know there's like degrees. Like I've seen before, there's like Doctor of Parapsychology. Do you have any titles like that?
No. I mean, most people enter parapsychology, I mean, if they get into it as grown-ups, they've probably got some sort of degree already. So, I mean, what I needed to do was to devour the literature and to hang out with the people who are actually doing the research. And that was my education, and I'm a quick study, so I think I got it down pretty quickly.
What kind of experiments have you either participated in or been witness to?
Well,
go ahead.
Let me see. How do I want to address that? I don't conduct experiments myself, but what that's not quite true. What I realized fairly early on was that experimental work of the kind done by people who have a background in psychology or physics, I mean, I don't have the necessary equipment. It's not part of a philosophy department's budget. And it's also not part of a philosophy department's budget to really finance on-site case investigations either. But I realized that I had a particular interest in checking out large-scale, that is, easily observable apparent psychokinesis, like poltergeist events or people who said they could make objects move, the kind of thing that I'd seen with my table.
Uh-huh.
And at first I started trying to check out hauntings and poltergeist cases and mediums and so on. I checked out all sorts of stuff, but a lot of those investigations didn't really pan out. I mean, sometimes I spent a lot of time just waiting for something to happen, and I couldn't really afford to do that. So I started chasing down people who claimed or seemed to have reasonably reliable abilities, and those were cases that I could document fairly easily with video recorders. So the best cases that I've personally investigated all have to do with large-scale effects like that, so people who could move objects. Probably the best case I've ever investigated was a woman in Florida whose body would break out in what looks like gold leaf.
I think I heard that.
Yeah, I could be sitting right across from her or holding her hand, and then suddenly something would appear on her body spontaneously and instantaneously. So one of my books, actually, the first chapter is all about her.
Wait a minute. It looked like it, or it actually was?
It wasn't actually gold. It turned out to be brass, which it didn't make its appearance any more miraculous.
Yeah. Oh, geez. It's only brass. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I think I understand why that is. It's actually a complicated story. You want to hear that?
Yes, yes.
My interest is piqued.
Well, let me back up. You may know about poltergeist cases. The usual understanding of poltergeist cases is that, first of all, these are person-centered phenomena. So that is, the phenomena hang around a particular individual, usually called the poltergeist agent.
Uh-huh.
And they're different from haunting cases. Haunting cases, for the most part, you could say are place-centered. That is, the phenomena stick to a room or to a house or something like that. But in poltergeist cases, it looks like the phenomena follow a person around, and we know that because once you identify the person, if that person moves to another location, the phenomena will follow.
Yeah.
So the usual psychological profile of a poltergeist case is that you're dealing with usually a teenager or adolescent, somebody with some serious emotional issues and no conventional way of getting rid of these feelings or dealing with them. And so it's almost like the poor person has these pent-up emotions and can't get them out, and so psychokinetically goes woof, and then things shatter or fly across the room or burst into flame or something like that. And then when the problem gets resolved, the phenomena go away. So, of course, it's not just teenagers or adolescents who have emotional issues, and marriage is a really good fertile ground for emotional problems, as I can personally tell you. So,
me too.
So Katie, the woman in Florida with the apparent gold leaf, she's a good all-around psychic, but none of her psychic abilities appeared until she married her second and current husband. And from all accounts, it's a difficult marriage. And at one point, poltergeist-like things were happening to Katie. So objects were appearing and disappearing in the house and moving around and so on. And then one day, a carving set appeared out of nowhere.
A carving set?
A carving set, yes. And Katie's husband said to her, well, what good is it if it isn't money? And then 2 days later, Katie's body started to break out in what looks like gold leaf. So if you want my pop psychological analysis of this, it would be that symbolically, the golden foil satisfies her husband's demand for something valuable, but Katie doesn't really have to bear the responsibility of being the goose that laid the golden egg. And I think that would be a very heavy burden for anybody. And not only that, but because she's not giving her husband what he really wants, it's one way, a kind of safe way of expressing her rage against her husband. It's fool's gold. She's giving him the psychic finger.
I like this, Katie.
I do too. She's a great person, actually.
Got somebody in the chat room, New York Lily, said, is that quantum entanglement?
I don't think so, because it doesn't have to. Well, how the hell should I know? I mean, quantum entanglement isn't now an overly abused and very trendy term, and I don't think 90% of the people who use it have any idea what they're saying. So the big question about Katie's foil is that what kind of phenomenon is this? I mean, I think I have a pretty good grip on the sorts of things that have been claimed over the course of the history of parapsychology. And the two biggest candidates would be that this could be a materialization, where Katie is just making something appear out of nothing, apparently. The other option would be that it's what's called an apport, where something disappears from one place and then reappears more or less instantly somewhere else. The problem is that if it's materialization, it's unlike any that I've known of, because all reports of materialized things say that the things that materialize later dematerialize. They don't hang around forever. But the foil, you can scrape off Katie's body and have it analyzed. That's how I know it's brass. So I've got lots of it personally. And
so it literally just grows out of her body?
It looks like it comes out of her body, but I think it actually appears on her body. And the reason I say that, first of all, if it came out of her, she'd have to have lethal amounts of copper and zinc in her system.
Well, I mean, if it appeared on her, it had to come from somewhere.
Well, that's the thing. So
is she putting it on there and screwing with you?
No, it's very hard to manipulate. That's very clear. And it's also, it occurs instantly, right in front of your eyes. So
wow.
That's what's interesting about the case. I mean, she has no control over it. I mean, it could happen to her when she's trying to check out at the 7-Eleven. What do you say then? And
like, is it like little flakes, or is it like her whole body? Like what?
No, not her whole body.
How large of pieces, I guess?
Well, the individual piece, it's hard to say. I mean, sometimes they're just little flakes. Sometimes you might see a mass maybe 4 by 6 inches.
Wow.
And sometimes it's stacked on top of other layers. It's very, very thin. It looks like what you can buy in art supply stores is kind of a cheap substitute for gold leafing. And that's the other possibility. See, if this is an apport, then the question arises, well, whose stash of brass leaf is being raided for this? And I've had some chemical analyses done, which were never actually completed. It's a time-consuming project, and you can't find people easily to do this. Trying to compare samples of Katie's foil to samples of commercial brass leaf taken from different parts of the country to just get some idea where it might have come from. If Katie's apporting this stuff from somewhere, did it come from Florida? Did it come from the Maryland, Pennsylvania area? Who knows? So that's still a mystery. The only thing I think I have a firm grip on in this case is, first, that it's a legitimate phenomenon, and secondly, that it's not coming out of Katie, and well, there was another thing, but I had a senior moment, so I forgot what the other thing was.
Can't help you there. I have those all the time.
Oh, I have them more every day.
I know. Isn't it awful?
Yes, it is.
Would it be kind of like and Lily kind of touched on it on the chat room again, ectoplasm, like
right.
Just some psychic material that just kind of happens and it just turns out to be brass,
Well, the term ectoplasm isn't altogether clear, but usually it refers to stuff that comes out of a medium, usually some orifice of the medium. Could be the mouth, it could be the ear, it could be the nose, it could be the vagina. And this stuff, as far as I can tell, does not come out of Katie because, as I said, she'd have to have lethal amounts of the metals in her system. And sometimes it appears on her clothing and on other objects in the room. So it looks like she's somehow or other, more or less unconsciously, just making it appear. But now, again, that doesn't distinguish it whether it's a materialization or an apport or something else. If it's an apport, getting back to the thing about quantum entanglement, if it is, then maybe there's some kind of entangled state between the source of the material and where it ends up on Katie, but I don't think that really explains anything.
Wow.
Now, does this only happen when she's upset, or does she have to consciously, like channel this, or does it just happen?
It's a good question. She has no control over this. If her main investigator, until he died recently, was a psychiatrist, and he knew Katie very, very well. He was her confidant, and he couldn't find any pattern. I mean, sometimes when Katie was having marital troubles, this stuff would occur, but other times when she was having marital troubles, nothing would occur. So she could go for months at a time with no activity, even though her life was stressful, and she could go for periods of time when it was just erupting all the time. She once told me that when she wakes up in the morning, she has to shower it off in the morning, and she has a septic tank filled with it.
Wow.
That's just unbelievable.
It really
How old is she?
She's in her late 50s now.
That's not very old.
No, I started investigating her in the mid-1980s.
Wow, this has been happening to her then for a long time.
Yes, it has.
Wow.
Why doesn't she just get a divorce?
Well, easy to say, but sometimes it's hard to get yourself out of lethal relationships.
Yeah, I know. But I'm thinking it's got to. If not just psychologically, I would think physically, it's got to be taking a toll on her.
Well, I would think so too. I mean, I don't know Katie well enough to really address that competently, but I think part of the problem is that Katie has only a first-grade education, so she's not really qualified to do a whole lot. She's functionally illiterate.
Wow.
And by the way, that's one of the really interesting things about Katie. Even though she can write her name, she can't write sentences. But when she's in a mediumistic trance, she writes out quatrains in medieval French and Latin from Nostradamus.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
I've seen her do that. And that's one of the things that brought me to Florida, because when I first found that out, I was writing a book on multiple personality, and I figured that was something I needed to check out, too.
And you don't think it has anything to do with multiple personalities?
No, but I think there's lots of similarities between multiple personality and mediumship. It's one of the reasons I first wrote a book on multiple personality before writing about the evidence for life after death. Because if you watch multiples, when they switch from one altar to another, it looks an awful lot like what you see in certain kinds of mediumistic situations.
Wow.
Now, see, when you first said that about Katie, I was thinking past life. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what came to me, is that somewhere in her past, she was lived back in those days in France, and that's why, and maybe she was highly educated male back then.
Could be. I mean, Katie's a smart person. She's just not educated, and she actually thinks all the phenomena that she experiences are caused by Nostradamus. Now, my humdrum explanation of that is that she saw a TV program about Nostradamus and just became fixated on it. But
enough to be able to write, though, in medieval French?
It's not clear that she understands what she's writing. I mean, it could be like a kind of clairvoyance where she's just, reading off what she sees in books from Nostradamus.
Well, I mean, there's got to be some kind of force, I mean, if she's freaking out and having brass, leaf, all over her body, she's got something going on with her.
Well, she absolutely does. I mean, she's an extremely interesting person. She works with the authorities to solve crimes. She's done some really interesting stuff along those lines. And, I mean, she's just a good all-around psychic. I'll tell you, I mean, one of the things I've seen with Katie, I think she's a good hypnotic subject, for one thing. She's very dissociative.
Okay.
So sometimes when we've been wanting to see if the foil would appear, what we would often do, we'd bring Katie into a room with one or more video cameras trained on her. And it was Florida, so she would have a short-sleeve shirt on, so nothing up her sleeve, and we'd check her out. And we'd talk to her for a while if there was no foil on her, excuse me, and wait for something to appear. And if nothing appeared, we'd sometimes ask her to raise her shirt, because sometimes the stuff would appear on her.
You dirty doc.
Sometimes stuff would appear on her back or on her abdomen.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes when she did that, we didn't see foil, but what we saw were raised welts in the shape of a butterfly or a cross.
Really?
Now, I mean, that sounds cool, but the fact is we've known about that kind of stuff in hypnotic situations ever since Mesmer. And so, you know, quite a few hundred years. So,
well, I want to interrupt you real quick. Now, you said that she's rather dissociative. Like, do you mean like more like multiple personality type, like dissociative identity, or is it?
Well, I don't think she's got a dissociative pathology, but she shifts very quickly into a dissociative trance. So, and she does seem to be a good hypnotic subject. Not everybody can raise welts on the skin.
Yeah.
So she has that in common with multiples, but I don't think she's got a pathologically dissociative condition. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just...
Lola's jaw dropped over there.
It is. This is just... I'm finding this so fascinating. I would love to meet Katie, honestly. And not because
really
I want to, you know, I don't want to... She doesn't have to, you know, produce brass for me or anything. I just think she sounds so cool.
She's very cool.
Wow.
And when the TV show Unsolved Mysteries did a segment on her, and I mean, she got along great with the crew. She's really a wonderful person and interviewed very well. And of course, everybody was hoping that while they were filming her segments that something would appear, but it only appeared when the cameras were turned off and people were just hanging out with her.
Isn't that always how it is? Like
often enough
for the luck of like all paranormal investigators, like real or not, like it's always when the cameras are off, that's when things happen, and then you can never prove it because of course, oh yeah, the camera was off, how convenient, you know. But you can, it always happens like that.
Well, it certainly happens a lot. I mean, the nice thing about Katie's case is that there's a lot of firsthand testimony that the phenomena occurred right before people's eyes, instantly. So it's not just from distinguished academics like myself. I mean, lots of people have seen this happen with Katie. So you've got a tremendous weight of testimony.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I once did actually catch it appearing on video, but the video footage is compromised, and the reason is we brought Katie into the studio where we often interviewed her, and we had only one video camera at the time, and I was operating it. And sometimes before the phenomena occur, Katie would sometimes feel an irritation on her skin. And as we were talking to her, I saw her rubbing her right eye with her finger. And it occurred to me that that was a precursor of the phenomena. And so I zoomed in because I wanted to get a good look. And at one point, Katie took her finger away from... Well, she would rub her eye and then take her hand and look at her finger. But when she did that, because I had zoomed in, her hand was now out of camera range.
Yeah.
So then at one point she put her finger back on her eye and rubbed it, and when her finger moved, there was a flake of the gold foil on her eye. Now, we had examined Katie very carefully. I'd looked at her, again, short-sleeve shirt, I'd looked at her hands, her arms, there was no foil there. You can't, it's very clingy, you can't just make it appear and disappear. And it's clear, I knew that she had no stash of foil she was dipping her hand into and then putting it on her eye. But,
yeah, you were right there.
Right, but there was no way, just looking at the video footage, to know that she wasn't doing that. So you've got to take my word for it that neither Katie nor I was up to some trick at that point.
And you actually wrote a book about her, right?
Well, the first chapter is about it. The book is called The Gold Leaf Lady.
Does Katie have any Native American or anything in her? ancestry?
I don't think so. She was born to a poor family in the mountains of Tennessee. But I don't know that for sure. I don't know the full story of her ancestry.
I was just curious. It just seems like, particularly people with some Native American in them, are just so much, they're so intuitive and they're so in tuned with the world around them that we don't necessarily pay any attention to. If
I don't doubt
that
that.
Makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. But I don't know whether that describes Katie. And remember that her phenomena really didn't begin until her second marriage. So for quite a while, there was no clue that she had any of these gifts.
Wow.
So it really seems like life just sort of forced it out of her. And what it may show is that this could be true of any number of us if we're backed up psychologically against the wall.
Well, I believe that. I think, there's so much of our brains that we don't utilize, and I think there are just circumstances that push you. What happened to her first marriage, do you know? Was it happy and he passed away or something, or,
I don't think, I don't believe that's the story, but I don't recall now. It's a good question, and I wish I could reach Katie to ask her, but my understanding is that she's in sort of a bad state in her marriage right now. So.
Oh, God. Wow.
Good questions. I'll remember that one if I ever get a chance to talk to her again.
It just, it would make sense. If she were content and happy, then, these kind of things, she wouldn't be under any psychological or psychic stress. Then she meets somebody else, they get married, and life turns to crap. And, this is how, well, like you said with the poltergeist experience, it latches onto those negative feelings, and that's how it's manifesting itself,
That could be the scenario. It could also be that the first marriage just wasn't satisfactory. I mean, it doesn't have to be abusive, which I think the second marriage was.
Yeah.
Is she still married?
I believe so, yeah.
Have they called any priests or clergy to check her out? Do you know?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think Katie would find that relevant because some of her gifts she has under control.
Now you say her gifts, like you said, she helps the police and all that. What else does she do?
Well, I mean, she does. She's apparently a healer. I've heard some very interesting reports of spontaneous healings. But she couldn't make hair grow back on my head. What she calls my landing strip.
When you find somebody that can do that, hook me up.
So she seems to have some healing abilities. Her son said she can make metal bend. I haven't seen that personally. Some have said that she can make seeds germinate in her hands. But to me, the most impressive things I've seen are, first of all, the Nostradamus writings, some of the apparent crime-solving stories are pretty good. I'll tell you one.
Okay.
Katie was asked to help out on a homicide investigation, and there's supposed to be video of this, which I haven't seen, but according to what I was told, the video shows Katie going up to the grave of the homicide victim. She hadn't been told anything about the case, and as she approached the grave, she fell over, and there was a big welt on the back of her head. And although she hadn't been told this, the victim had been killed by blunt force trauma to the back of the head.
Wow.
And in another case, I think she'd been brought to Atlanta to work on a homicide. And again, she didn't know anything about the case, but she was shown a photograph of the victim. And when she looked at it, her face and her arms broke out in long scratch marks. And what had happened to the victim was that she was fleeing her assailant, and in doing so was running through some bushes and got very scratched.
We have a case here in the next county down, Marshall County, where they found a young man in the woods, had been there a long enough that they couldn't really determine cause of death. And the thing was, he wasn't from here. They kind of have a trail of where he was. I think he ended up for a while in Columbus, Ohio, and came back. But he had an engagement ring and a credit card that had not been activated yet on him. And his family in, I think, New Jersey or Long Island, one or the other, said that he had, he was a schizophrenic maybe or something and had drug problems, but they really didn't show an awful lot of interest in finding out why he was here or who may have harmed him or what happened to him.
That's peculiar.
Oh, it is. And it's been driving, the sheriff's office and everybody down in Marshall County crazy. But, the trail was cold really before it ever started. And, boy, I'd love to get somebody like Katie or someone else that they're not averse to, any kind of help at this point in time.
Well, I can turn you on to a couple of people who are good. Okay. But I'd rather not do that on the air. If you remind me, send me an email and I'll send you a contact and you can do that.
Oh, that'd be great. Because I've kind of, I've asked him because at this point it's more about, just solving it for the sake of their peace of mind. Finally finding out what happened to this young man. Because
it doesn't sound like the family cares from what you said.
That's the impression I got was that, he's been trouble and, he's been gone and oh well.
So whose peace of mind is going to be?
The sheriff's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, people, they really took it to heart. I mean, this was just a kid, a young man that, they just like to know what happened.
How long ago was this?
I think wasn't it a couple years ago?
I don't remember.
I think it was a couple years ago. So, all right, that'd be great. We'll get in touch with you by email.
Yeah, please do.
Now, Stephen, I want to ask because we've been talking about psychokinesis, and we've been hitting more on making things appear on the body and like the poltergeist activity. What about like spoon bending and stuff like Uri Geller? What are your thoughts there?
I think some of that is clearly genuine, and I'm willing to believe that some of Geller's phenomena are genuine too. I know some of my friends in the field have tested him doing various things and under what they believe are pretty good conditions. But the thing is, I would hate for the case of psychokinesis to depend on the phenomena of Uri Geller. And it's not because I think Geller's a fraud, but it's because his phenomena are too easily duplicated by fraudulent methods.
Yeah. So
the fact that they can be imitated by means of trickery doesn't show that that's what happened in Uri's case. But because they're so easily replicable by sleight of hand, I think it's more impressive to track down much larger scale phenomena, which is why I wrote an entire book about the large scale physical phenomena of mediumship around the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Because here you had massive object movements under really good conditions, or materialized phenomena under really good conditions, and with no technology at the time that would account for it. You want me to give you an example?
Oh, surely.
Probably the greatest European physical medium was a guy named Daniel Douglas, or initials D.D. Hume, H-O-M-E. And he lived in the latter part of the 19th century, and he was a medium for about 25 years. He was never caught cheating. He had an enormous repertoire of phenomena. Some of his seances were conducted for convinced spiritualists, and so they were done in darkness and with no controls. Those are clearly not the cases that count, even though those are the ones the skeptics focus on when they want to divert your attention away from the good cases. But he was also investigated very carefully by quite a few critical observers, and I'll give you my favorite example from the case of Hume. One of Hume's principal investigators was the famous physicist and chemist William Crookes. And one of Hume's favorite phenomena, or most dramatic phenomena, was making an accordion play, sometimes while untouched and floating around the room, some people would say, and sometimes just held at the end away from the keys, where it couldn't be manipulated. And people would say the accordion would play melodies on request, and they would be played beautifully, and so on. Now, Hume thought, or at least claimed, that the phenomena were strongest under the seance table, which sounds a little suspicious if you're of a suspicious turn of mind.
Yeah.
But it could also just have been Hume. I mean, Hume wasn't a scientist. It could have been his naive belief about what happened. So Crookes did the right thing, I think. Figured, this may be what Hume believes. if he does, then it would be really stupid experimentally to force Hume out of his comfort zone any more than necessary. So the thing to do would be to try to find a careful way of investigating the phenomena under the table. So here's what he did, and I think this is really ingenious. First of all, he bought a new accordion. Okay? Mm-hmm. So nobody could say this was a prop that Hume had somehow rigged.
Yeah.
And then he went to Hume's apartment. He watched Hume change clothes to make sure that Hume wasn't concealing some sort of contraption on his body. Although I have to remind you, this was 1871, so it's not clear what kind of contraption in those days they could have had.
You never know.
Right. So then he brought Hume back to his house, where he had constructed a cage made out of wire and wood, which fit under his dining room table. The accordion was placed in the cage. There was just enough room for Hume to get his hand in under the tabletop and into the cage so he could hold the accordion at the end away from the keys. But there wasn't enough room for Hume to get his hand all the way into the cage so he could actually manipulate the accordion. There were 9 observers present, all members of the Royal Society of Science in London. 2 of them were stationed on either side of Hume to make sure he wasn't taking his feet out of his boots. And there was another observer stationed under the table with a lamp. And under those conditions, the accordion was seen to move in and out, the keys were depressed, sounds came out of the accordion. And then Crookes told Hume to take his hands out of the cage, put both hands on the table, and an electric current was run through the cage, and the accordion was still seen to flop around inside the cage. Now, I personally think that's one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the history of parapsychology. No magician, including James Randi, has ever tried to duplicate that phenomenon, and I think for good reason, because under the conditions in which it was investigated, they simply can't do it.
Wow.
Well, now how long ago was this again?
This was the late 1800s.
Okay. So James Randi wouldn't lose that $1 million.
No.
Now, what do you feel about that? You know, if there's all these, you know, cases, you know, like the paranormal stuff, you know, like the psychics and, you know, even like the gold leaf lady, I'm sure she could use the money.
Well, but she doesn't have the phenomena under control. And, well, there's so many things that are a sham about Randy's challenge. Uh-huh. First of all, he can select which cases he wants to do. And the way his whole thing is set up, if he thinks it's too outrageous or claims it's too outrageous to be possible, he can just refuse to investigate it. So he's got an out for anything he knows he can't touch. Okay? Yeah. And secondly, he demands a kind of criterion of statistical significance that is much stronger than what would be required in any kind of science, much stronger than what's required to demonstrate the efficacy of aspirin, for example. And also, a one-off experiment doesn't show anything one way or the other. So if Randy got good results, it wouldn't prove anything. I mean, if the psychic got good results, it wouldn't prove anything. If the psychic didn't get good results, it wouldn't prove anything.
Yeah.
And a magician's opinion doesn't count for anything anyway. I mean, Randy is no arbiter of any of this. He's not a scientist.
Yeah, he was just the amazing Randy.
Right.
Now, go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, I was going to say something nasty about Randy.
Be my guest. We do it all the time.
No. There are enough others doing it.
Okay.
Here's somebody to talk bad about. No. Sylvia Browne. How do you feel about the things she does? I mean, not necessarily, hey, what's your personal opinion of her as a person? I mean, like, her...
is she real?
Her gifts.
Yeah. I don't know if she's real or not. I mean, to my knowledge, she's never submitted herself for testing. And I'm not aware of any predictions she's made that are sufficiently precise that they could really be confirmed or disconfirmed.
Okay, here's one for you. ABC is running because they simply want to get out of the dramatic series business, I guess. It's all this reality show stuff.
Right.
And the other day on Good Morning America, and they were going to do a special, and instead they tapped it for a special on Casey Anderson for whatever, God knows reason. But on these psychic twins, have you seen that they're twins, literally. They finish each other's senses. And yet they can supposedly they've predicted all kinds of things that have come out to be true, and they've helped, I guess, with the police with some investigations and stuff like that.
I don't know about that particular case. I do know that there are a number of cases of apparent telepathy between twins. And actually a friend of mine in England, Guy Playfair, has written a book about that. But no, I'm glad you told me about this. I'll see what I can find out about it. I haven't heard about this, at least that I'm aware of. I haven't heard about that particular case.
Well, I know they were on Good Morning America one day last week, I think, and then, like I said, they were supposed to run, some kind of special on it, and then they preempted it for something on Casey Anderson and that whole.
Well, do me a favor. If you find out anything that's going to be on about that, please alert me to it. So. Oh,
yeah, I sure will.
It's hard for me to keep up on all the alleged psychic phenomena out there.
Oh, yeah. Now, what kind of cases what grabs your eye and says, you know what, I'm going to work on this case?
Well, one is, can I afford to investigate it?
That's always a big one.
I mean, sometimes I get to ride on media's coattails, and that's nice. And sometimes I get grants to investigate cases. In fact, I have been investigating a spiritualist group in Germany that has been getting table levitations and ectoplasm and all sorts of interesting stuff under decent conditions, and wow. They're letting me video record some of the stuff in infrared. So I'm not ready to report really on this yet, and the investigation's still ongoing. But it's a really interesting case. This is just like the old stuff, like from the end of the 19th century, where the medium goes into a trance and masses of gooey stuff come out of his mouth, and that can't be explained in terms of just regurgitation, I think. So
that's kind of crazy.
Where are you now? Are you living in Florida now?
No, I live in Maryland.
You live in
Baltimore.
Okay.
I'm about to make the big move west to Las Vegas. I'm retiring.
Vegas?
It's my hometown.
Okay, sorry.
It's like returning to the scene of the crime.
Kind of. Mine would be Detroit, so I don't know that I'm ready for that yet. But I thought you'd said something about Florida, because that's
where Katie lives.
Yeah.
Now Vegas. What other than that being your home, what do you plan on doing out in Vegas? Because
I'm going to retire, but
let's be real. You're not retiring from.
No, I'm not retiring. Well, I can still make trips to Germany to investigate those folks there. I'm editor-in-chief of the Journal of Scientific Exploration. I'll continue to do that. I'm also a professional musician, so I hope now that I'm not going to be teaching and chairing my department, I'll be able to spend more time making music.
Now, you got a website with your music. Is it The Jazz Philosopher?
Jazzphilosopher.com, yes.
That you playing on the piano?
That's me, yep. That's the only video currently available. There'll be more, I think, once I get a chance to sit down and practice.
Now, I got to ask, because we're talking about the topic, can you move things with your mind?
Not that I'm aware of, although I have good parkma. I find parking spaces really well.
In other words, you're not a line loser. That's good.
I'm not aware that I have any gifts, but it may be that the real stage of operation of all of this is under the surface. I think, psychic phenomena don't just happen for parapsychologists, and they don't just happen when parapsychologists set out to look for them. So the reason people investigate paranormal phenomena experimentally or formally is because there are lots of reports of it occurring spontaneously in life. So presumably there's a natural history to psychic phenomena. There's something that they're doing. There's some role that they play in life, whatever that is. And my guess is if you really want to understand what psychic functioning is doing on a day-to-day level, probably one of the best things to do would be to check out people who are unusually lucky or unlucky. Okay. Because that may be one of the ways it actually manifests on a day-to-day level. And I'm really interested personally in extremely unlucky people. And they're out there. There's an old Yiddish distinction between a schlemiel and a schlemazel. A schlemiel is somebody who spills soup on himself, and a schlemazel has it spilled on him. So the idea is that a schlemazel is an unlucky soul, somebody who's being victimized by impersonal forces of the universe at large. Somebody the universe is crapping on. And Schlemazzles really exist. I was actually married to a Schlemazel once. And her entire family was a family of Schlemazzles.
Oh, so
they were like lightning rods for misfortune, you know. And I lived next door to a couple of Schlemazzles once. It would be nice to know if they were Schlemazzles before they met and got married, and there's no way now to find that out. But there's no doubt that their life was a living hell of aggravations and annoyances. So, for example, nearly everything they bought was defective. So,
lovely.
Electronic equipment would fail to work right out of the box. Their cars were always in the shop, even though they both owned Hondas. A solid wooden rocking chair broke within the first couple days they owned it, with their infant son sitting on it. And my favorite example of their Schlemazelness, if that's even a word, is that the wife bought a poster-sized photograph of what she thought was the Golden Gate Bridge, and she had it framed and put on her living room wall.
Yeah.
And I had to tell her it was the Brooklyn Bridge. So I don't know whether your listeners are old enough to know that that's the old, buying the Brooklyn Bridge is the old quaint image of the person who's a sucker, you know?
Yeah.
And so here's a woman who both literally and figuratively bought the Brooklyn Bridge.
That's
so,
great.
This could be the kind of natural stage of operation for psychic functioning. It could be, just as people can make themselves sick or healthy, it might be that they can make themselves lucky or unlucky. And of course, another possibility here is that it's something that's being done to them by somebody else, which is part of what's, I think, very terrifying to a lot of people about psychokinesis. Because if it exists at all, then we have to take seriously a kind of worldview where thoughts can hurt or kill, and where we have to worry about things like hexing or the evil eye.
Well, I would be remiss, being as I'm such a government conspiratist. I can't think of the word. But anyway, men who stare at goats.
Yeah.
Was that, I know that was a movie, but the CIA or somebody actually did that kind of a program. Was it successful?
I don't know the full details. I actually know the guys who were, or at least some of the guys who were inaccurately portrayed in that. They say that there were things like that were happening, but not quite. Not what the movie was suggesting at all. The movie didn't really give you the full story.
I'm sure that A, they didn't look like George Clooney, and B, they weren't sitting there actually staring at a goat.
No, it had to do. It actually had to. No. That's my understanding.
They do look like George Clooney.
Well, we are out of time.
We are. I'm very glad that you decided to join us today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes,
thanks for having me.
It's been
on.
a quick hour. We didn't even take a break.
I know it. And that's the joy of being the producer here. I can just say, you know what, we're not going to. So, well, thank you very much. And we'll get in touch with you with the email about those people you can, get me in touch with.
Okay, thank you.
And definitely sometime sooner or later have you back on.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Before you go to Vegas and get too busy playing a piano and studying people with Schlemazel.
Well, at least there you'll be interviewing me mid-afternoon in Vegas.
That's true. That's true. And we'll be drooling the whole time.
Thank you very much.
All right,
thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Braude, he's written several books. I mean, The Gold Leaf Lady. I want to get a hold of
They'll
that.
all be linked up on our website, right?
As soon as I can figure out how to do that one.
Okay. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Gold Leaf Lady, I Googled it because I wanted to see if there was like a picture or something.
I know, I looked too.
And I mean, I went on like Google Images, and like every single one was a picture of his book.
Oh.
Like all the pictures were his book. I was like, oh. That's why I was like, you wrote a book about it, huh?
Well, she may be, not wanting the publicity. Why would you? If I had gifts like that, I don't know that I would want my face out there because of all the people that would attempt to take advantage of you.
Oh, yeah. Especially the people that would think it was real gold and try to like shave your skin or something. Or
kidnap you and make you like the gold goose that laid the golden egg, Yeah, that was really interesting, Jordan. I'm so glad you got in touch with him.
Me too.
He's really cool.
We do not have a show next week because of the holiday.
That's right. So have a happy 4th of July. Don't play with firecrackers.
Be safe. Be smart.
Yeah.
Don't drink and light stuff on fire. I mean,
seriously.
You listen to Whispers Radio. Don't drink and light stuff on fire.
I know.
After that, we have Dr. Turi, and you guys are going to enjoy him. That's all I'm going to say. I think we're going to be touching on
you scared me when you called the other day. What's your birthday? Well, why? Do I have to give you the year?
Listen, I asked him to be on the show because we had one of our listeners suggested because they thought you would love it.
I'm sure I will.
Healing through tuning fork vibrations.
Okay.
They were like, Lola would love it. Lola would love it. I listened to him, and Lola's going to love it. And after talking with him, I don't know what the show's going to be about. But it is going to be interesting.
Okay.
Okay, so definitely tune in. The 11th will be the next one.
Yes.
Everybody have a safe holiday. Until then, don't be afraid, only believe.